my name is Yula and you are watching U-Multicultural's Community Hour. In this segment, we are talking about civic issues in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Today, we are talking about building a society where all voices are welcomed and encouraged, where every human experience is valued and similarities and differences are viewed as strengths. For this special episode, I invited Martin Itzkov. He is an executive director of Coalition of Manitoba Cultural Communities for Families, and Florence Okudeli. She is a board chair for the CMCCF. Hello, Martin. Hello, Florence.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
And first of all, Martin, can you please introduce yourself and tell us more about the organization you are running?
Okay, I'm Martin Itzko. I'm the executive director of CMCCF, as you've introduced it. It's an organization that was incorporated in 2018, but it's had a history going back 15 years of working between communities, cultural communities, relatively newly arrived immigrants, refugees, and focusing very much on their relationship to larger systems. And we're talking specifically in terms of government institutions and also service agencies. And what's the relationship between cultural communities and those other systems so that actually their voices are heard in public policy development.
Florence, can you tell us how did you get involved in the organization?
I got involved in the organization because I'm someone from the cultural community, and cultural communities have one thing in common: the values that binds them together. And raising my family here, I needed the cooperation and collaboration of other communities, because one of the things that is valuable to my community is the existence and collaboration of other communities and everyone. My families need to work together to achieve what they want to do. We do not grow up in silos where I come from. We value everyone's input. We value everyone's diversity, and I wanted my family, my kids, and other children and families to also grow up and be in that same realm. And that's why I got involved with this, because I feel that it's a coalition that will bring out the values that each community's needed and fighting for. So we value everyone's cooperation, and everyone's diversity is very, very important to us.
Tell us, how was it to move from your country to Canada? Was it hard for you to adjust to a new society?
It wasn't that difficult, but it was hard when we started living it out, because I found out that my community played a very big role in the adjustment of my family in this society. And that's where the communities becomes very vital. If it wasn't for my family, for my communities, it would be more difficult. I know the government have other agencies that are there to welcome new immigrants, but most of the times when a new immigrant comes into this community, they look for someone that they know, someone that speaks their language, someone that looks like them, someone that understands them. And sometimes we do not find this in the agencies that exist. And also there are other values that are more important to me at that particular time. Take, for instance, even the fact that, you know, people open their doors to you, welcome, just smiling to you, asking how is your day, how is the cold, how are you adjusting. It's much more important to me at that time than, you know, than any other thing that we hear from the government. So it's for adjustment for immigrants or for new immigrants. It's a day-by-day thing, and those day-by-day also help them to adjust faster than we can think. And we need the cooperation and the collaboration of other communities around us to help us achieve to that adjustment faster.
Were you open-minded to different communities and to to learn more about other communities, or you were more with your community?
You know, one of the biggest things with the African culture is the importance of people. We value people. People is much more important to us than anything. Families are important, children are important, our animals are important, the environment is important. So all these things grow in tandem. They have to collaborate. So we valued, yes, when I came, I found even my neighbors much more important to me than the next step that I will take. So if my neighbor, if I have a question, I feel I have to run to my neighbor to ask those questions. And I expect to get answers from my neighbor rather than I have to learn to call, to use the phone, to call, or to ask questions, which is not something that a new immigrant is used to. So that's where families and other cultures becomes important. And that's why the coalition is asking that this is a new idea, which is not really new to these communities, but we are bringing these ideas to the level where our voices, where the agencies understands that this is another aspect of how communities deal with in their various communities. And try to give voices to this particular diversity or particular value that is much important to the new immigrants.
Martin, you are working towards healthy communities, healthy families. What is your definition of healthy communities?
Well, that's an interesting question to ask. I can't answer the question from a community perspective. We're still working through that because we know there are multiple indicators of well-being. There are hundreds of indicators, and we know a lot of those ideas exist in the context of how systems actually look at how they evaluate what well-being means. We are working through that process right now because we believe strongly that many of the well-being indicators that will come from a community may be completely different. A different context, different language, and then how we capture the data about that will be something that communities will tell us about. It's primarily about the lived experience, the felt experience of people in their communities, in their families, with their friends, with different structures of families. We don't have all the answers. We know there's mental health is a very important part of it. We know physical health is a very important part of it. We know access to economic support and stability. But we want to hear from a community and from individuals in a community how they define well-being and what are the indicators for them. And then I'll have better information for you as we go through this process.
Yeah, can you share with us some of your programs? What do you do to help to implement these ideas?
So it's interesting. We're called a collective impact organization. So we're a backbone organization that actually, as a coalition, is working on building relationships with other systems, other organizations who have the same mission, which is increasing the health of communities and families. And so within that work, we actually have focused on bridging, on actually engaging, on training, and advocating. So from a bridging point of view, we work with many systems from a community perspective, and our board members are from multiple communities. We have many people within our broader network of many communities, and we bring together service providers, communities, and hopefully basically policymakers to start thinking about how do we work better where social justice, equity, diversity, inclusion actually takes form in Manitoba. We have trained, recently we completed one go-round of training specifically for young people, anywhere over the age of 18 to about 25, in terms of learning how to facilitate and engage change. And not many groups are teaching that process. So we started that program, and it's actually called Cultural Communities Engaging Through Dialogue as a training program. And we're starting to look at expanding that over the next year. We do cultural community engagements, and in the next week or 2 weeks, we're actually going to have 2 panels talking about diversity. We're bringing Statistics Canada and people with the lived experience, being able to talk about what does the data that Canada actually collects and how valuable it is in terms of us understanding what it means from a perspective of what's the lived experience for diversity and inclusion. And we're working with the Vanier Institute of the Family, and they're coming to another panel to talk about their family diversity structure and how does that play out in terms of lived experience and community. We're working with a Brandon group right now about coming to Brandon and facilitating a couple of sessions and probably more about how communities and cultural communities view their future. So there are multiple things that we're doing. Our fiscal end is at the end of March. We start a new year and we're starting to look at new activities.
What are your expectations of these activities and programs? What do you want, or what impetus it will have on public?
From a cultural community perspective, and Florence can speak to this really well, but I'll speak to it first, okay? Is that we have a first principle. And our first principle is anybody from any cultural community that's impacted by policy, their voices must be heard, not just one time only in terms of seeking input, but also in terms of the practice and the engagement and the implementation. That's really important. People impacted by policy, their voices need to be heard in a very different way that currently is happening. So that's really important. The second part of that, and which is really saying clearly all voices matter, but all voices matter need to be brought to a process and working with communities to have psychological safety and not have fear of bringing their voices forward when they actually agree or disagree with policy. And our experience working with policymakers, to some extent, they're engaged, but we think we can go further in terms of a better dialogue and understanding of how the world is seen very differently by both parties.
Florence, what do these programs means to you, and how it is important for you to be a part of the CMCCF organization?
Thank you for the question. I think also one of the things that I would say that have benefited communities, or I would say why it's important, is that as a collective communities, our voices are even made stronger through these engagements. And it's also an opportunity for us as cultural communities to look at the most important values that we have and how the policies that are being made, how are we impacted by those policies? Are we impacted in a positive form, or are we impacted in a negative form? We look at our communities individually. We come together in engagement and engage each other and talk about these policies that are made. How can we move it even further? How can we use it in our own communities respectively and see, and use it to our own good? And then if there is something contrary, then it's also an opportunity for our voices to be heard. So it makes us stronger. We are working towards building a stronger communities, and also a community that is well embedded in moving alongside with the government and with the agencies, and making sure that policies that are coming out of these agencies are well informed from the community point of view, and not just making sure that these voices were at the table to help in shaping these policies. So I feel that we are working towards a stronger communities, and hopefully, we'll get there.
And if we compare the time when you just moved to Canada and now, how our society changed in terms of understanding between different communities?
I will tell you, it has changed a lot. I came to Canada in 2000, and it has really, really changed a lot. And thank goodness for more immigrants that have arrived into this community. There is more agencies that have been set up to serve the immigrant communities. But I want to also add that we are trying to ensure that these service agencies are better informed of what these communities are. They have to go beyond just learning what is in front of them to learning where this group of people are coming from. We have new immigrants arriving from Ukraine, from Syria, from, before in 2000, we don't have prayer places for Muslim women or Muslims in the offices. We don't have, when service agencies are going into homes, they need to be informed of the practices that are there, that these communities have. So one of the things that the CMCCF is building on is making sure that every community's most important values are brought to the table, and that service agencies are also informed of what is important for them to learn.
But I would go one step further if I can, and that is when you start thinking about the idea of service providers, and there are multiple service providers available, whether they're immigration settlement services or the generic ones, health and so on. The question we always ask, and there are some things that are going very, very well, and there's a lot of interest, obviously, and experience between service providers and communities. But one of the areas that we think that can actually be developed even further is how communities and service providers co-create. So it's not as if the service providers come to a community and say, this is what we provide, please take advantage of it, please send us people. Our intention over time is how do we bring communities and service providers to start co-creating services that are meaningful to community, have clearly an understanding of the values and the expectations, and to some extent the way communities see the world, which would be probably somewhat different than service providers. How do they come together and work together? That's our challenge, because when we've been working with both parties, and we have a program right now looking at how do we strengthen the relationship between cultural communities, the diversity of cultural communities, including within the communities, diversity of age, diversity of experience, lived experience. How do service providers and communities start talking to each other so they understand each other, which is really important, excuse me, and then how do we actually then bring in the policymakers, and all three of them coming together to start to look at it from a different perspective and strengthen the opportunity for people within communities to live and live a fairly satisfying life.
Sorry, I want to go back to the question you asked, how the difference from the time I arrived and now.
Yeah.
I wanted to share an experience that happened way back then that I think right now, going back to just stressing what Martin have just explained. At that time, it was the African refugees that are much more in the city, and they were coming from mostly the Muslim background, and or even not. They were coming from countries where English wasn't their first language. So and coming from a high context culture from Africa, like Africa, it was even more difficult for service providers to efficiently serve these communities. There was a lot of gaps that were created. There were lots of bridges that were not crossed over. So at that time, women, especially women, were served less. Women were less responsive to the changes that they just came in. So if you look at immigrants that arrived between 2000 and 2010, which is African communities, if you look at the rate of adjustment of the women were less. And the growth rate was less, and even adjusting to the new environment and everything was lesser than now. So this goes to speak to what we were doing, that service agencies are now learning more before they create a policy or they create a service. They learn more of the community and what the area they need to concentrate on and focus on, and that's helping us more, and we want more to happen, because before it was African immigrant, now it's more immigrants coming from other places. So we want the service agencies to continuously learn with us, co-create with these communities, and we are there to help facilitate all this.
And what has helped you as an immigrant to adjust to a new society?
I personally, I jumped out there. I was much more involved. I'm a community person from the word go, so I got involved with various communities. In community building in my local area. I was we used to live at North End, and I got involved with the schools, what my kids were doing. I volunteered. Volunteering my time was one of the ways I learned fast. I volunteered with the neighborhood watch. I volunteered with the school. I volunteered with the community. Anything that we are doing in the community, I learned myself there, and I began to learn more. So it helped me a lot.
And Martin, what are the benefits of living in a multicultural society? Building a healthy society takes time, it takes effort, it takes education, but we also benefit from this.
Right. I guess my question is really one of looking at the fact, do you value diversity? Do you value inclusion? Do you value difference as you value similarity? The reason why we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion is because of communities that have come here over the years have now become an asset and are important assets of our community and are actually making Canada a much better place, Manitoba a better place, Winnipeg a better place. The challenge we have, are we actually practicing diversity, inclusion, and equity effectively within communities and communities to the larger systems? But I think if we are able to move in that direction, and I think looking at and imagine the future, there is the possibility of actually being a healthier community at large, because we have different perspectives and we have diverse ideas and we understand and we actually cherish that. That's really important.
And where do you want to see Winnipeg, Manitoba in 10 years in the future in terms of understanding between communities?
Less divides. We have a lot of division in this community. And that's really problematic, and we know that. And it's partly because, again, people are not engaging and understanding and actually having the opportunity to figure out, how do I engage people who are disengaged? And that's another conversation. But if you think about it, a lot of this is about who's disengaged. What do they see in terms of disengagement? How will they define how they are not connected, they are disconnected, they're not part of something? And there are many people who've removed themselves for all kinds of reasons. We want to see people becoming much more engaged and having safe spaces, because we cherish the belief that CMCCF provides lots of safe space, safe conversations. We may disagree, but it's a space people can come and actually be able to provide their voice to almost every issue.
Florence, your organization provides different programs, different webinars, and what do you think works the best and what has not worked?
What has not worked, I will leave that one for Martin to answer, but what has worked best for us as a coalition is the ability and providing a space. Firstly, is providing a safe space for communities to come together. Okay. When communities, we had one event where we demonstrated communities, like different communities sit at the table to build with Lego. We used the Lego to demonstrate that. And different communities come together to build a Lego together. And in that building of using the Lego to build a community, we found out that what you think is more important to you is also important to me. It's also important to the other communities. But then we pulled these voices together. And we said, rather than you talking from as Ukrainian, African, Syrian, wherever, we can put those voices as one. And then so that we are speaking from one voice. So what has worked together is that communities are stronger, communities are supposed to collaborate more, and communities have to understand, also understood, not have to, that what is important to them is the same thing that other communities are also looking for. So it's a way of bringing everybody in one spot, rather than different, like Martin talked about, there's a lot of differences. A lot of communities are not working together well enough. But with the coalition, it brings us in one spot, in one position, to talk about one thing that is much more important to us.
And Martin, which one of the instruments or tools you tried to implement hasn't worked?
The important thing is to know in the last 2.5 years, I think COVID has done a lot of damage to communities, lots of fatigue. And we have community writers, and one of our community writers is actually bringing a story about how COVID has actually damaged community in many ways. I think because we've had to go through technology and use technology as a method of engagement, and having to learn how to use that across all of our platforms has been quite difficult, because that's not our expertise. But now we are becoming expert in that area too. But I think generally what has not worked is the fact that, and we're focusing a lot of attention, trying to get youth voices in this process is even more important to us now. Youth leadership from cultural communities is incredibly important. And we see that in terms of the lifeblood of communities, community organizations, especially in terms of the future of cultural communities, young voices having a stake and actually having a voice now that are heard and are respected become really important. That's where we are putting a lot of energy, because we haven't up until now. And so in the next couple of years, our focus will be, and I think forever, will be youth leadership, because we think it's time. And it's not that they have to wait 20 years. Their leadership is required now, and they have leadership that's readily available. Let's figure out how to bring it together.
And in addition to what Martin just mentioned about youth, it goes to speak about cultural communities as well. When families come into Canada, the whole family is working at different levels. The young people are working at different levels. The mom is working at different levels. The dad is working. The whole cohesion of a family as a family doesn't really exist. And that is the challenges being faced by families when they arrived in Canada, because the children wants to succeed in what they are doing. They have to learn to make new friends. They have to learn to whatever differences they are seeing in school, they want to bridge that gap very fast. But again, they came with some knowledge and values from their countries, and the family, the parents are trying to not control, but instill their values that they come from. But then they have to also find job, they have to work, they also have to learn the new things in their professions and all that stuff. So there is a lot of challenges for families when they arrive in Canada. And as a coalition, we realize that the young people's voices are not there, are not heard all the time, and that's where we find the most challenge in bringing your youth to the table to speak about, what is also important to them as coming from a cultural community.
For whom do you think it's more difficult to adjust to new society? For adults or for youth?
I think the adults.
Adults.
Yeah. I think
Why?
the parents.
Why?
The parents, I would say from my own perspective that I grew up in Nigeria. I learned all my growing up. I've learned my values and everything. But I came here with my kids. My kids are growing. It's the time of their life where they are learning things. So they have the opportunity of learning the Canadian culture. But I also have a duty to raise my kids in a way that I feel it's important, for my culture, for my values. So the parents are worried about adapting to the new culture and to their new society, as well as making sure that their family does not disintegrate. Because mind you, anything learned in or any new value is like, it have to be weighed through the lenses of their culture, my culture. And then it's a harder hurdle to pass, because while you are thinking about what you knew and now the new learning, the learnings that are going on around you, and having to adapt and be part of that new life that you want to create for your family is so challenging. And that is why most immigrant families experience a lot of problems in their first 10 years of arriving in Canada. Some make it, some disintegrate. And some of this disintegration occurs not because of money or anything. It's about experiences, it's about the values, intersecting values that are coming in. They don't know what to believe in. They don't know what to hang their hopes on. They don't know what to turn to. The children are learning faster than the parents, and the parents are trying most times to get back to their profession of whatever they are doing in their countries before they arrive. So there is a lot of stress on relationships. Relationship between couples, relationship between parenting, and relationship between the young people with their families. And most times these young people, they end up trusting the outsiders, because the schools are also there playing their own role. So we found out that young people, especially from the cultural communities, are harder to get than any other communities. Firstly, and we realized the reason, but we are also, and that's one of the things we are working on, to try to bring them, because they have a role to play. They cannot, they cannot just, we cannot just forget about that group. They have a role to play in this whole coalition, in this whole policy making formulation, because it will affect them in future. And we want them to come to the table to be part of these voices, because part of these voices that will create this change that we are looking for.
But I just want to add something, if I can. Taking the values one step further, on March 6th, on March 21, we're having 2 online panels, one on Statistics Canada in terms of diversity and equity. What does Canada say? Is the statistics on what's happening in our world and the lived experience. The second one is March 21st with basically family diversity. But I want to throw something in. What's happening and what we know that's not necessarily understood, family structures are different. We have family structures of transnational. Somebody lives in Canada, somebody lives abroad. We have examples of people who've actually been foster parents and have actually fostered somebody from another culture. We have single parents. We have same-sex couple parents. We have basically new family structures, new identities. So I think that's a challenge for many people who have an understanding of family in a very different way compared to the people who are living it. And think about that from a community point of view. That's diversity that already exists. How do we talk about that, and how do we surface that? Because it sometimes is contrary to certain values, certain beliefs, but that's the reality of our lives. Family structure, identity, sense of belonging has changed dramatically. What do we do about that? Unless we talk about it and understand that, it goes hidden. It's invisible. And that creates more stress for families and for communities.
What steps can we take to make all voices are allowed and heard?
That's a difficult question to answer. Probably, I'll try one way, maybe Florence will try.
Yes.
Our job is to bring people to a place of safety. Because we know from past and the research, many people from many communities don't feel they've been heard.
Policy safety.
Exactly. But it's about safety. So psychological safety, social safety, and really helping us understand that. That's number one. Number two, having a place for people within communities to facilitate their own conversations. Our job is training people to do that facilitation in a range of ways, and mostly young people. So that actually helps the conversation, the engagement, but safety. And then the third part I think is really important is actually ensuring that people, when they come, that they actually know and understand how to respect other people's voices, even if they disagree. That's really the challenge, because we come into engagements, we often just want to debate. We have our opinion, but we don't want to necessarily have debates. There's a place for debates. This is very much how do we engage so all voices are heard on a topic, and in a way that we both learn from the experience. We may disagree, but we start to understand the other person's perspective. Because I know, and this is not my lived experience, but I know from Florence, many other people, this notion of othering, which we talk about all the time, to me it's also saying, we're basically saying you're invisible. Mm. You're invisible and you're irrelevant. And we've heard that before from many people. I feel I've been othered, and in the othering process, I also feel I'm invisible. My voice will never be counted, and I don't have places to bring that voice. So our job is bringing the visibility back in, trying to minimize the othering, but primarily a safe space, many safe spaces for all voices to be heard where people know and have the lived experience that it counts.
I just also want to add, I guess I want to tie back what Martin said to your first question, and I'm talking about the young people now. When I came, or when I arrived into Canada, the service agencies then were focusing on English as a second language, finding a job, da 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 da. But moving on forward, we've have generation of children that have grown as well. And that's why we are also focusing on the young people. My hope is that serving agencies that are serving immigrant communities or serving agencies that are out there will look at what these years of immigrants living in Canada have produced. The young people that have come out of this relationship, of this endeavor, of these experiences, have different ideas. Like Martin just mentioned, we have diverse families now. While I might be a family of mom and dad, and we have families that are single parents, we have families that are same sex, and these are families, and they have young people that are all mixing up outside in the society there. So our hope is that the serving agencies will move up to the next level of making, bringing out policies, and that is with working together with cultural communities to create policies that are better serving for our young people. For instance, my community will frown on a young woman, even though it's a graduate, finding a house and an apartment and going to live in alone. Like, why? Why are you are not married? You can't live alone. They feel that you have to be protected. They feel you have to, there are so many things that they still need to be doing for you. But the young person, the young woman, already knows that they can do things on their own. So these are, and then when you bring that young person to come to the table with the cultural communities, they have different aspects. They have different things that they need to talk about. And one of them might be freedom. So we are hoping that through our engagement with young people and with serving agencies, that the serving agencies will begin to also understand that a new generation of immigrants are emerging, and these are emerging through young people, and they need to also focus on their needs and their wants. Even though they are young, they are new, they are diverse, they are everything you can think about, but they are still tied to their community. So you cannot just separate that link. But we can all together stay at one table, engage, collaborate, and come up with policies that will better serve this group of people.
Just to wrap up, what would be your message to people who are suffering from not understanding and cannot adjust to a new society, and how to make their lives easier and smoother? What can help them?
I feel that one of the ways they can do, get things or kind of feel relaxed, because they have to feel relaxed, first is be part of things that are happening in their communities. Engage with other communities. Go out there, volunteer your time, learn about other communities, volunteer your time with what is happening in the city. You know, events are happening, be part of it. When you come close, you learn. When you isolate, you don't learn. I encourage people to be part of anything that is happening. Engage yourself, visit, attend events, and learn more. There are so many free events that are happening, and also on television and on radio. Listen. When we listen, when we go, when we attend, when we engage, we learn more. But when we sit on our own side, we do not learn. Mm-hmm. We are only contented with what we have. But we all, as human beings, will benefit from learning from each other. I will learn a lot of things from people when I go out. But I will also remain an ignorant fool by staying in my house. So I encourage any new person, anybody, to feel free to learn from one another. I know one of the things that is popular in Winnipeg before COVID was potluck. Potluck is one way that people interact over meals. But COVID now, mm-hmm. I'm hoping that those things are brought back and that communities will begin to share again.
Martin, I want to know your opinion. What are some
Well, I'm
advice?
listening to this and I'm agreeing, but I also understand the reality. Many people have multiple jobs. They're working incredibly hard just to survive. So if they had a chance to connect with the people they're working with, to open up and to be able to engage and see the opportunities just to spend time with other people and maybe very different cultures, different experiences, and not be afraid. And that's really important. But just being realistic, a lot of people are just having a hard time. But I do agree. Connect with your communities if you feel comfortable and safe. Find other people and maybe co-workers, spend time with them, engage. I would hope that if the co-workers and other people engage people who are newcomers or new Canadians, we hope for that, but I know it's difficult. But absolutely, mutual learning is really part of the process. If you have the time, step out of yourself and start to learn. And we know lots of people who do, but we also know a lot of people who just don't. Who just don't, and are really isolated. And especially with COVID, the isolation has been incredible. Unbelievable. But we hope going forward, at least the work we're trying to do is engage more and spread the word and come to our engagements and meet other people. And we have some other ideas going forward.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Florence, for this great conversation. I learned a lot from you. Hopefully our audience know more how to make their life smoother and easier and how to make connection with other communities. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you our audience for joining us today. We hope you enjoy it. If you like the episode, please like, share, and subscribe to see our upcoming episodes.